Joining me now here on Locked On College Football, Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network. Want to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being our official recruiting sponsor as well. Na'eem Offord goes to Ohio State. This is a big-time recruitment in the 2025 cycle for the Buckeyes. Brian, what can you tell us about one of the top corners? Some sites have the top corner in the 2025 class.
Out of Parker High School in Birmingham, this is probably the best player in the state of Alabama. He is arguably, as you said, the top corner, and it's because he's 6'1", 180 pounds, really long. He can play free safety, he can play nickel, he can play boundary. It does not matter. Man coverage, off man, doesn't matter. Everything that you would want in a guy. I'd take him right now. He would compete for playing time at some SEC schools. I'm not saying he'd walk into Georgia and start or something like that, but he had an offer pretty much from every school in the country. And coming from Birmingham and committing to Ohio State, that is about as unusual as it gets. I wrote an article about it on Arbor Daily, and it's still doing, people are just in shock. It doesn't happen down here. The kids stay here in this state. Clemson will get a kid occasionally, maybe Georgia, something like that, maybe LSU, but nobody goes up north. That's an elite player in the state of Alabama.
Yeah, we're going to talk about what it means for the Crimson Tide a little bit later, but what does it say about Ohio State and what Ryan Day has done? There have been a lot of reports about, him really working hard on the NIL front and making sure their coffers are well stocked up there in Columbus. And they've got a great roster for 2024. And the early efforts here, getting a guy like Offord out of the state of Alabama over the Crimson Tide and the Tigers, that's a really notable development on the recruiting front. So what do you make of kind of what this means for Ohio State?
They figured it out because not only do they have him, they've got a kid from Houston that's arguably the best corner. It depends on which site you're looking at, Sanchez. So they got the top two corners. I don't know in my lifetime I've seen one school get the top two guys. That's insane. So they're going wherever they have to. Their sell is great. Obviously, NIL has got to be a part of it in some capacity. But Ryan Day's invested. For those who thought that he was out the door, I think that's pretty safe to say that it's not. You're not going to recruit hard if you're planning to leave. You're not. So I think it's an incredible achievement. I honestly don't remember a recruitment like this from the state of Alabama in the last decade. Maybe since before Saban. Nobody goes in there and gets the guy. Not even getting a top three player in the state is hard. Kudos to Ohio State staff because that's a staff effort. And they're getting him in freaking February. You know what I mean? This is, last signing day, at the end, they're getting him almost a year in advance for when he's going to sign his letter of intent with the Buckeyes. That's incredible.
Yeah, and you make a good point about it being a 2025 signing, an important one. This was not a national signing day late addition or flip from Ohio State. This is them putting in the early groundwork towards 2025. And I think, partially at the very least, Ohio State certainly has always had a commitment to recruiting and building a high caliber roster. And we've seen that lately as well. But with Oregon in the mix, there's another recruiting power player there in the Big Ten, and Oregon just landed a top 3 class in the 2024 cycle, number 1 in the Big Ten. Do you think this is kind of a statement recruitment for Ohio State to say, hey, we're not going to just be out-recruited every single year. If you're going to get a class that's rated higher than ours, you're going to have to work for it?
I think it absolutely is. They know Oregon and USC and UCLA and Washington, they're going to bring a lot to the table. But Oregon's the best recruiting machine out of those 4 programs. And Dan really likes to recruit, and Lanning staff in general does a really good job nationally. It's arguably the weirdest school to kind of cover. And obviously, all about that with Locked On Ducks, but they're getting it done every year. If you don't keep up with them, eventually you're going to get run by. Oregon's recruiting classes are good, especially up front with their defensive linemen. I think this is kind of a message from Ohio State. You really do. Their fans have been bitching about the D-line recruiting in particular. They missed on a couple of key guys the last couple of years. Now they're getting a few more corners. D-line's next on their board. That's the next question for them. Can they get some of those guys to kind of fill in the gaps? But everything else for them looks really, really good.
Na'eem Offord comes out of the state of Alabama. This is someone who, under Nick Saban, most likely does not leave the state to play college football, or at least as his first commitment, certainly would not be someone who goes outside the state. Is it as simple as that Nick Saban isn't there, Kalen DeBoer and company are, and that's why Offord chose the Buckeyes over the Crimson Tide, or why anyone even had a chance over Alabama here?
I don't know. Like Auburn was trending with him the latest, to be honest, but maybe that's because Saban had left. I don't know. Like there was a lot of talk about him just being a great player, but nobody thought his recruitment was coming to a close like in early January, right before Nick left. There just wasn't discussion about that. Then all of a sudden Saban leaves. There's talk about Auburn's trending for this kid. Some people thought he might commit. And then like a week later, I was told like he's going to go Ohio State. I'm like, what? I didn't even know they were in the mix for that kind of commitment. Everybody had offered it. I mean, everybody. So it went from he's probably just going to stay in state. We'll figure it out somewhere down the line to he's going out of state and soon. Very unusual. Saban being the guy that kind of kicked it off by accident, quite possible. So, yeah, they don't lose many Birmingham kids. It's about 45 minutes from Tuscaloosa. So when he wants a key guy, and Nick is still the DB coach when he was there, he was in the meetings. They didn't lose a lot of those guys. Kool-Aid McKinstry, Birmingham kid. Yeah, he's getting ready to go first round in the draft. Surprising? No. That's another Saban disciple.
And by the way, just thinking about DBs that had ties in some capacity to Alabama that are now at Ohio State, we just saw Caleb Downs go over there. I mean, you look at, he's going to be a true sophomore this year. You're going to have Na'Eem Offord. You're going to have Caleb Downs playing in the same secondary. You said they had another great corner in their recruiting class as well for 2025. So things certainly looking up for Jim Knowles to continue, the defensive coordinator for Ohio State, having some really talented players and good units up there. Let's pivot to Alabama because one of the fascinating elements of Nick Saban departing and Kalen DeBoer coming in is that while DeBoer was at Washington, he did not recruit at a high level. And you don't always see that just because a coach doesn't stay at a place for a long time. I mean, you look at the way Lincoln Riley recruited Oklahoma. He was there for several seasons, but was not, a 5 to 10 year guy. He recruited at a very high level. Mario Cristobal recruited very well at Oregon before he ended up bolting to Miami. It's never been DeBoer's forte. Now, in 2024, Alabama pulls in the number 2 high school composite class in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. As for their efforts in 2025, how much of a blow is this to their class, and what do you expect to see from them in the first full cycle with DeBoer and his staff at the helm?
It's a blow because he's not one of the people in this state. I live in Alabama now. It's about locals here. It's going to take a minute. And I know Alabama fans want to hear that it's about what's on the shirt. It's not. It's the person wearing the shirt. The high school coaches will eventually adapt. I've heard good things about DeBoer in general. But for the immediate class of 25 and maybe 26, it's going to be an adjustment period. These guys do not know the coaches in Alabama and Georgia. Those are the 2 main states they recruit. They certainly don't know what's going on in Florida that much. It wasn't like the guys from Seattle were getting flights over to Miami. So all their main areas, they don't know. They've only got a couple commitments right now for the class of 25. Not that that's terrible. Alabama wasn't always a fast-starting team under Saban either, but they got the guys at the end that matter, the 4- and 5-star guys in the top 100. I think they're going to struggle some. And to that point, Auburn's kicking their butt right now in the state. They've got coaches with a lot of ties to the state of Alabama, with a lot of ties to Georgia, with a lot of ties to Mississippi. They just took Lane Kiffin's main guy who's recruited in Mississippi for like 15 years. He's getting kids to look at Auburn from that state too. All the ties are in Georgia and Auburn. Those 3 schools kill each other in recruiting, Auburn, Georgia, and Alabama. Alabama doesn't have those ties. If they don't have a top 10 class this year, I would say there's better than 50% chance of that. You or I would have never even considered that being an option under Saban. I mean, 0. There's just no chance of that. So are Alabama fans going to like it? No, but there's not much you can do about it. They're going to end up with a few more West Coast kids. You got to recruit where guys, no coaches. And it's probably going to be a year or 2 before this adjustment takes place. How patient will Alabama fans be with that? What do you think, Spence?
I'm gonna hold comment at this time on that particular question. We'll see how things shake out. I think if you're a Bama fan listening to or watching this and you're looking for a piece of encouragement on the recruiting front, Ryan Williams once upon a time decided, I don't want to play for Alabama, then decided again, oh no, I do want to play for Alabama because I like what this DeBoer guy brings to the table. I think the defensive players are going to be the challenges. They brought in a couple of head coaches for their staff, the one from Buffalo and a guy from South Alabama as well. Offensively, I think they will, with DeBoer's prowess as a coach, and if Ryan Grubb remains as the offensive coordinator, they've got a track record now of their short time in college. They put guys in the NFL, they throw the football, they air it out. That is a well-established brand for them. And so guys like Ryan Williams, not as surprising, but certainly something that should be encouraging if you're a fan of the Crimson Tide. But if you're talking about the defensive players, guys like Na'Eem Offord, that could be a little bit tougher in what you were talking about with Auburn in the trenches and everything. It's a fascinating thing to watch play out, but DeBoer didn't necessarily have the most 24/7 talent composite when he was at Washington, and he won a lot of football games there. So we'll leave it there for today. Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider, brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As always, Brian, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.